He was the top student of the Demon Academy, and he followed every standard a demon should. Eventually, he rose all the way to become the Demon King. But things didn't go the way he planned. In the end, humans killed him. So he swore that if he ever got another chance at life, he would never follow the Demon King standards again, except kidnapping the human princesses, then vowed to become the most powerful demon humanity has ever witnessed. Will he succeed? We'll find out in this story. In a world that refused to face reality and chose denial over truth, the Demon King stood frozen, unable to comprehend the sight before him. His pitch-black flames, the very power he had boasted of for centuries, failed to leave even a scratch on the hero. Meanwhile, the hero's sword had pierced straight through his supposedly indestructible scales and lodged deep within his chest. He stared in disbelief, unable to process what had happened. To him, superiority was a fact of existence. He was the prodigy who entered the Demon King Academy at the highest rank, graduated as a model student, and devoted his life to mastering the Demon King standard, the sacred doctrine crafted by the first emperor. He followed every rule with absolute precision, constructing a tower, kidnapping princesses, and raising heroes as the standard instructed. He genuinely believed that feeding on the anguish and fury of trained heroes would elevate him to unimaginable heights. Killing them too early was wasteful. Heroes needed time to ripen. The stronger the hero, the richer the feast. And so, he adhered faithfully to the doctrine, convinced world domination was inevitable. After absorbing hatred and sorrow from countless victims, he had risen to unmatched power. Yet now, sprawled in the dirt, drenched in his own blood, he screamed in confusion, unable to understand why his end had come in such a humiliating way. His eyes trembled with shock at this senseless defeat. The hero gazed down at him with contempt. He ridiculed the Demon King and all demons as identical fools, beings who created their own downfall yet acted surprised when it arrived. When the Demon King roared in protest, the hero revealed a truth sharper than any blade. Kidnapping a famous princess was nothing more than a widely accepted signal that the Demon King had begun his activities. It was practically an invitation for heroes to mobilize. Mocking him, the hero explained how absurd it would be to kidnap the human king instead. Doing so would only plunge the kingdom into civil war, turning humans against each other instead of the demons. Their rage would scatter, their hatred would fade, and the Demon King would gain no power from it. Such an act completely contradicted the standard the Demon King worshipped. And then came another blow: sarcastic gratitude. If heroes did not challenge the demons first, the demons themselves conveniently sent monsters to villages, giving heroes the training they needed. The tower's first floor was always filled with weaklings, perfect for easy experience and skill polishing. The Demon King recalled with bitter regret how he had let heroes survive halfway through the tower, believing he was following the sacred teachings by allowing them to grow stronger. He had never realized he was simply raising them for their own benefit. The hero yanked his blade free, ripping more agony from the Demon King's throat. Then came the final revelation. When a tower becomes outdated, when the challenge grows stale, they simply kill the Demon King. A new tower, and the cycle begins again. The entire place was nothing but a hunting ground crafted for heroes. Laughter burst from the other heroes as they mocked him. They thanked him for raising them, calling him not a Demon King, but their godfather, the one who had nurtured them into greatness. Standing over their defeated enemy, they bragged openly about the loot they would collect and the levels they had gained, treating his tower as a mere training field. The Demon King murmured the word Godfather, stunned beyond reason. His life's work, his grand tower, reduced to nothing more than a beginner's farm for adventurers. Though the hero acknowledged that many challengers had perished inside, he dismissed their deaths as trivial sacrifices, stepping stones that added to his own fame. As the hero prepared to finish him, the Demon King's fury erupted. Humiliation burned hotter than any flame he could wield. Was this the glorious end promised by the standard? Was all his devotion meaningless? He refused to die quietly. With a desperate roar, he unleashed his final power, declaring himself the true Demon King as immense energy swirled violently around him. But before the power could reach its peak, the hero severed his head in one clean strike. Even so, in his last fading consciousness, he glared at the heroes, vowing revenge with an intensity that chilled the air. The hero, shamelessly greedy, warned his comrades not to damage the head. He wanted the horns intact. Then he noticed it, the strange flickering sparks rising from the Demon King's corpse. Realization struck too late. The Demon King was pouring the final remnants of his life into one last act. The hero shouted for everyone to run. A monstrous surge of energy detonated from the body, shaking the world as the heroes screamed in terror. Everything vanished in a blinding explosion. In those final moments, the Demon King understood the bitter truth. The standard he worshipped was a lie, a tool the heroes had used to manipulate and mock the demons. He wished with his last breath for one more chance, a chance to tear apart that standard and feed it to goblins as revenge. Then, through the darkness, a voice echoed his name, Betrayal. His eyes snapped open. Confusion flooded him. Voices echoed through the grand hall, urging him to step forward, urging him to realize that the name being called belonged to him. Betrayal stood frozen, stunned by the surreal moment unfolding before his eyes. Another student nudged him to hurry to the stage, but before he moved, the academy principal sharply rebuked him for daydreaming on the most important day of his life. After all, Beria was hailed as the academy's brightest prodigy. Then his gaze fell upon the crimson badge awaiting him, the emblem of graduating from the Demon King Academy. In that instant, he understood the impossible truth. He had returned 15 years into the past, to the day of his own graduation ceremony. As the graduates were summoned one by one, Baron knew nothing about why he had been sent back, yet instinctively recognized the value of this second chance. A professor approached, informing him that, as the leading student, he was expected to recite the sacred oath on behalf of all new Demon Kings. Before him stood the glowing commandments of the Demon King standard. The ancient laws dictated the duties of every Demon King: construct a tower, kidnap royalty, orchestrate chaos while planting clues, nurture heroes until their emotions were ripe for harvest, and fill the lower floors with weaklings to steadily raise the difficulty. Bird stared at them with pure disgust. These very rules, once memorized until he could recite them half asleep, once followed with religious precision, were in truth nothing but the very chains that doomed him. They had shaped him into little more than a puppet for the heroes, a tool in their game. Standing amidst the ceremony, he wondered what point there was in swearing obedience to laws he now knew would only lead him to ruin. Rage surged within him at the thought of being forced to repeat the same mistakes. When the official called him forward to recite the oath, Barris shattered every expectation. He refused, flatly, publicly. A wave of confusion swept through the hall. Students and instructors alike stared at him as if he had lost his mind. But Barry didn't stop there. He raised his voice, declaring that he would never swear loyalty to such idiotic rules. Following the standard, he proclaimed, was the most foolish, backward act imaginable. Gasps erupted across the hall. Terror and shock painted every face. In that moment, the Academy's celebrated genius became, in their eyes, the greatest madman of the era, the Archduke of the Demon Realm. Arcane Blarimph slammed his fist down, enraged by such blasphemy against the sacred standards. He threatened immediate execution, yet he paused, reconsidering as he took Beria's exceptional talent into account. Instead, he offered one final chance: withdraw the insult and apologize publicly, or accept punishment in the form of deployment to the Aran region. Fearful murmurs filled the hall. Aran, a dimension known as the Graveyard of Demon Kings, where they perished in droves. Some demons hissed in anger, insisting execution would be more fitting than mercy. The Archduke warned him again, in a tone dripping with finality, that Aran had claimed the lives of countless demon kings. Berja cut him off with cold indifference. He demanded to be sent there immediately. He declared that he would prove to the world that the so-called sacred standards were nothing but nonsense. The Archduke stared at him, stunned by the audacity. Losing all patience, he roared for Beria's immediate transfer to Aryan. Every privilege normally granted to top-ranked demon kings was stripped away. No escorts, no servants, no protections. A portal opened. Beria was banished with a strict order. He was forbidden to return until his conquest was complete. Falling through the swirling darkness, Beria accepted his fate. Chaos was expected after what he had said, and in those tumbling moments, he remembered a crucial truth. Aryan was where the very heroes who killed him in his previous life resided. In that past life, he himself had chosen Aryan, blinded by pride, believing the strongest demon king must conquer the harshest dimension. That arrogance had killed him. The heroes there had taken advantage of his rigid obedience to the standards and crushed him. This time, when he landed in the freezing snows of the Ergist Mountains, wings unfurled against the icy wind, he vowed that history would not repeat itself. This time, he would be the one exploiting the heroes' rules. Meanwhile, before the ceremony had begun, Gordon Dirick was preparing with meticulous care. As the Academy's top-ranked demon and first in his class, he had the rare honor of being assigned to the strongest demon king of the year. According to tradition, the highest-ranking demon served the highest-ranking king. Such a privilege drove envy into the hearts of the students who finished second and third. They regretted not working harder for the chance to serve Lord Berja. To Gordon, all demon kings were fearsome beings, but none could compare to Berhideus. He believed Beria was a miracle, a once-in-a-millennium prodigy, a descendant of demonic dragons whose future deeds would be carved into history forever. Graduating in the same year as him was, to Gordon, a blessing of destiny. He imagined conquering dimensions at Berja's side. He imagined statues built in their honor. Berja the Great King and Gordon, his loyal right hand. But those dreams shattered instantly when he remembered the moment Beria shouted that the sacred standards were nothing but trash. Gordon had been unable to breathe from the shock. His idol, the one he revered above all, despised the very foundations of demon society. His admiration cracked. His beliefs crumbled, his world flipped upside down as he struggled to comprehend the king he had sworn to follow. The scene shifted to the remote depths of the Urgest Mountains, where Gordon trudged through the snow, carrying several heavy bags. His face reflected bewilderment and despair as he tried to understand how events had taken such a disastrous turn. Beria noticed him arrive and felt a brief moment of surprise. He had been firmly informed that no demon attendant would be assigned to him, yet one had still been sent. Once he recognized the young demon, he offered him a calm welcome. Gordon, overwhelmed and unstable, immediately demanded an explanation. He questioned why Beria had chosen to act so recklessly at the graduation ceremony. Beria, however, responded with an attitude of feigned confusion, pretending not to understand the accusation. Gordon's frustration erupted. In his anger, he reminded himself that Beria had mocked the sacred Demon King standards before the entire academy, an action that had resulted in both of them being exiled to the deadly region of Arin. He believed that his own life was now in danger because of that single moment of defiance. Barry attempted to soothe his panic, mentally noting how Gordon seemed ready to tear out his own hair in anxiety. Gordon believed his appearance was irrelevant compared to the life-or-death crisis they now faced. In that moment, Bergie reflected on how drastically Gordon had changed. Before Beria's return to the past, Gordon had always been composed, confident, and endlessly supportive. He had once insisted that together they could overcome any obstacle, even Arin itself. Beria recognized that the panic now gripping him was understandable, considering how different the circumstances were this time. He also acknowledged that revealing the truth of his time reversal would only make Gordon see it as delusional. Eventually, after struggling to regain his composure, Gordon apologized for his earlier breakdown. Accepting the grim reality of their situation, he returned to his training in the only foundation he trusted, the standards. He reminded himself that the first rule required the construction of a Demon King tower, but he also knew that the standards emphasized accessibility. Towers were meant to be built in locations easily reachable by heroes, not hidden in perilous mountain ranges surrounded by dangerous beasts. Given this, he believed a relocation was essential. Beria rejected the idea instantly. His resolve was firm. He would build the tower in this exact location. He took out the tower seed and pressed it into the frozen ground. Gordon felt panic wash over him yet again. He viewed Beria's actions as a complete rejection of demon pride and a violation of everything a Demon King was meant to stand for. Beria remained cold and unmoved, internally reminding himself that he had never sworn to follow those outdated laws. Deep inside, Beria understood why Gordon reacted this way. For a demon, the standards were carved into instinct. Denying them felt unnatural. Rejecting the standards was almost impossible unless one had experienced something as extreme as death itself. Beria drew a blade and slashed his hand, allowing blood to drip onto the seed. He mentally commanded Gordon to pay close attention, insisting through his actions and tone that the Demon King standards were nothing more than useless debris, especially here in Arin. The seed absorbed the blood and released a brilliant red beam, activating a magic circle beneath the snow. While the tower began its identification process, recognizing him as Beria of the Black Flame demonic dragon clan, he mentally revealed to Gordon the hidden truth. Humans had destroyed countless towers throughout the ages, and in doing so, had unraveled the inner workings of the standards. Humanity had twisted those standards into tools to manipulate Demon Kings, which explained the endless cycle of death in Arin. In Gordon's silent shock, Beria inwardly mocked the doctrine, believing that the standards should be renamed the Hero Standards, since they benefited humans far more than demons. The summoning completed, and the colossal tower rose from the snow. Both demons stood before it, observing the immense structure. When they entered, they discovered that the first floor was completely empty. Gordon noted with disappointment that ordinary towers usually contain traps, structures, and monsters. This one, however, was stripped bare, as though it had been issued to a king deprived of all privileges. The emptiness continued through each floor until they reached the fifth, which should have housed the king's chamber, but it too was barren. Realizing the tower was already set, Gordon insisted internally that they must at least follow the second rule of the standards. That rule required the capture of a prince or princess, ideally one close to the royal throne, to harvest the greatest possible emotional energy. Once given permission to advise, he spread out a map and considered the surrounding kingdoms. The closest realm to the Urgest Mountains was the kingdom of Khorasan, and Gordon believed targeting the royal heir from that kingdom would be the most efficient strategy. Berge acknowledged the kidnapping idea. Though he fully expected Gordon's confusion, he mentally noted that he already had a very specific princess in mind. Gordon's enthusiasm reignited. He imagined accompanying his king on the mission, but Beria instructed him instead to remain in the tower. Beria reasoned through his tone and decisions that the Demon King's residence should never be left unattended. Gordon accepted this explanation with relief, convincing himself that Beria had finally regained his senses and that the earlier chaos had merely been the result of stress. Then Gordon asked himself who the target princess was. Burge delivered the answer with absolute certainty through his actions and expression. He intended to go to the Hilderin Kingdom, the realm located at the farthest southern edge of the continent, practically the opposite side of the world from their tower. Barge flew across the freezing night sky until a large royal castle appeared far below him. He approached one of its high windows where a young woman stood alone. Her long blonde hair glowed softly in the lantern light. From a single glance, Bari identified her as the 13th princess, the least influential and most overlooked among the royal daughters. He shattered the window's lock and entered her room with a decisive step. The princess stared at him, astonished yet strangely composed, as if uncertain whether the figure before her was real. Bari made his purpose clear through his cold demeanor. He was the Demon King, and he had come to take her. Instead of screaming or collapsing in fear, the princess let out a faint laugh, an odd reaction for someone facing abduction. Rather than panic, she questioned whether he was truly capable of handling her. The boldness of her words momentarily surprised him. He wondered to himself whether she considered Demon Kings nothing more than a joke. With unshaken confidence, he internally reaffirmed that a Demon King could easily manage someone of her status. Unexpectedly, the princess offered her surrender without hesitation. Her calmness struck Barja as suspicious. Something about her behavior felt wrong. He examined her carefully, wondering what sort of trap she might be hiding. She dismissed the idea of a scheme, reasoning to herself that as a princess, such an event was always a possibility. She argued that she couldn't have prepared any plans since she had no knowledge of his arrival today. Barj admitted inwardly that her logic could not be dismissed. Even so, an uncomfortable feeling lingered in his chest. Cutting through his thoughts, the princess extended her hand, silently signaling that she was ready to leave. Ari lifted her easily into his arms and took flight, carrying her through the cold night back toward the tower he had raised in the Argus Mountains. Upon landing, Gordon rushed out to meet him, a mix of excitement and nerves overwhelming his expression. Bari ordered that the princess be placed on the 4th floor rather than imprisoned, explaining internally that her complete lack of resistance earned her a measure of leniency. Gordon accepted the command, though his confusion deepened. While Gordon prepared to speak about another urgent matter, the scene shifted to the princess herself, now alone on the 4th floor. She sat on the bare stone floor, quietly acknowledging to herself that she had indeed been kidnapped. The empty chamber held nothing. No bedding, no carpets, no servants, no luxuries. Yet despite the harshness, she allowed a subtle smile to form, whispering that the situation was not entirely unpleasant. Downstairs, Gordon presented a sealed letter that had arrived, a formal invitation from the Tower of Beasts, welcoming Barj as the newest Demon King. Barj dismissed the invitation as a pathetic display of intimidation, a shallow attempt to show dominance. He reflected internally that Demon Kings rarely cooperated, bound as they were by pride, but the brutal conditions of Arene had forced even proud kings to work together out of necessity. Recognizing that he could not ignore such an invitation, Bari decided to attend. In the past, he had considered the local Demon Kings weak and unworthy of attention, but his second life had taught him the value of information and alliances. He traveled to the Beast King's Tower, a massive structure rising from the dense forest. Inside, he found Draxen, the Demon King of Beasts, seated upon a throne and tearing into raw meat with feral intensity. Draxen observed Pierce with blatant disdain and commented that he was the new king who dared mock long-standing traditions, an unimpressive figure in his eyes. Bari responded with icy detachment, mentally challenging him to state his purpose. Draxen let out a cruel laugh and revealed that Archduke Arcane had ordered him to monitor Barja's actions closely. Bari reacted with open contempt, inwardly referring to the Archduke as an irritating ancient vampire whose satisfaction could never be achieved. Draxen was enraged by the insult. In an attempt to humiliate him, he tossed a bloody piece of meat to the ground and commanded Bari to lick it as a form of apology. He threatened that doing so might earn Bari forgiveness. Barja didn't react to the order. Instead, he questioned whether Draxen truly understood why he had been summoned here. Draxen arrogantly stated that he did, that Pierce had dared to mock the sacred Demon King customs. Before he could continue, Pierce reminded him that those very traditions forbade Demon Kings from killing one another. He struck the floor with enough force to crack the stones, startling Draxen. Bari wondered inwardly if the Beast King genuinely believed he would obediently follow such outdated rules. A chilling pressure surged from Barja, making Draxen realize too late he had misjudged the new king. The Beast King fumbled for authority, invoking the Archduke's name and reminding Barja that he was required to present a report verifying his kidnapping of a princess. Failure would mean losing his rank. Barja dismissed him with cold clarity, revealing that he had already abducted a princess, and that she happened to suit his preferences remarkably well. Draxen fell silent, unable to interpret the ambiguous statement. Leaving the Beast King stunned and uncertain, Bear returned to his tower in the Argus Mountains. Gordon praised his master for displaying the dignity of a true demon king, but Beria downplayed the incident. He believed Draxen would not dare escalate the conflict at this point, though caution was still necessary. He instructed Gordon to check on the princess and determine how she could be used to their advantage. Despite his confidence, Beria felt an undercurrent of unease. The other demon kings posed a potential threat, especially if they united against him. He acknowledged that the consequences of rejecting their traditions were greater than he had anticipated. Yet even so, he knew he would make the same choice again. He would rather die than bow to the worthless rules that had once destroyed his life. He had vowed never to repeat the catastrophic mistakes of his previous life. This time, he intended to rebuild his power from the ground up, choosing caution over arrogance. He knew abducting a low-ranking princess would yield only a modest amount of demonic energy, but he had considered it the safer path. Yet, when he checked his accumulated points, he froze in disbelief. His total had surpassed 13,000, an amount far greater than anything he had anticipated. Shock washed over him, raising countless questions. Before he could process the anomaly, a magical notification sounded. A video transmission from the Tower of Beasts appeared, catching him off guard. Draxen, the demon king of beasts, filled the screen. His tone carried an odd mixture of mockery and courtesy. He congratulated Beria on becoming a new demon king and claimed he wished to offer a goodwill gift, despite their unpleasant first encounter. Draxen acknowledged that accomplishing anything in Overrun was no small feat, implying that Beria's disdain for tradition might conceal something far more profound. Beria sensed immediately that something was wrong. Just then, Gordon burst into the room, pale with terror. He reported that something serious had happened on the 4th floor. Uri hurried upstairs, only to witness a sight he had never expected. The once barren, icy chamber had transformed into a lush, vibrant garden. Flowers bloomed in every corner, butterflies drifted lazily through rays of warm light, and the air carried the scent of fresh blossoms. The floor had begun undergoing naturalization, an incredibly rare phenomenon for a Demon King's tower. At the center of this flourishing ecosystem stood the princess, surrounded by elemental spirits of wind, earth, flame, and water. Beria immediately understood the significance of what he was seeing. Only someone who had mastered all 4 elements could achieve such a miracle. Only one such master existed on the continent. He confronted her with the truth. She was not the 13th princess at all. The princess responded with an amused smile, noting that she had expected him to mistake her for Elena. When he demanded her true identity, she revealed it proudly. She was Ernan Hildurin, the first princess of the Hildurin kingdom. News of the kidnapping spread across Hildurin like wildfire. The king's fury erupted instantly. He raged throughout the palace, threatening annihilation upon whoever dared lay a hand on his beloved daughter, Ernan. He ordered that every hero, every elite soldier, and the entire national army be mobilized to retrieve her and destroy the foolish demon king responsible. Amid the chaos, Ernan looked at Beria inside the magical garden and reminded him of the question she had asked earlier, whether he could truly handle someone like her. She explained that her overwhelming elemental affinity had been the reason behind her earlier test. Beria insisted inwardly that he hadn't been fooled by her appearance. He knew of the mythical elemental prodigy overflowing with mana. It had been impossible not to sense such power, yet somehow he had missed it. With growing curiosity, he wondered how she had suppressed so much energy. She lifted a hand, showing him a ring, an ancient heirloom of the royal family, capable of concealing vast amounts of mana. Ernan then asked whether he planned to return her, now that he knew her true status. Beria rejected the notion instantly. Returning her would turn him into a laughingstock. No kingdom would fear a demon king who timidly surrendered his hostage. Without fear, he could not gather demonic energy. Keeping her captive was the only viable option. At that moment, the system detected a massive wave of anger directed at him from afar. His demonic energy surged violently, skyrocketing beyond 19,000 points. Beria understood immediately. The Hildurin kingdom had identified him as the kidnapper. Whether she was the 13th princess or the first made no difference now. He informed Ernan that she remained his hostage. In the Hildurin throne room, panic and fury erupted. The king demanded immediate action, yet his advisors hesitated. They had no clear information about which demon king was responsible. Reconnaissance teams were dispatched at once. The king's anger reached its peak as he berated his advisors for their incompetence. One advisor nervously recalled the fate of the demon king of lust, who had been killed by heroes after abducting a neighboring prince. He could not comprehend why another demon king would dare repeat such an act, despite that fatal example. The room fell into uneasy silence. Something about this kidnapper was strange. Another advisor concluded that the situation must involve a newly risen demon king. Their suspicions were confirmed when a soldier arrived with intelligence. Traces of teleportation magic had been discovered heading north, toward the Urgist Mountains. Shock rippled through the council. Their kingdom lay in the far south. The Urgist Mountains stood in the extreme north, across numerous countries. Gordon expressed deep concern, fearing the arrival of the Hilderan army, but Bear remained composed, even smiling with confidence. He had calculated everything beforehand. The road to the Urgist Mountains was perilous, filled with monstrous territories. Dozens of nations stood between the mountains and Hilderan. None of those countries would dare allow a foreign army to march across their borders. That left Hilderan only one option: hiring heroes. The king reluctantly accepted this reality in order to immediate contact with the Hero Guild. Yet at the guild headquarters, panic erupted as soon as they heard the destination. The Urgist region was infamous as a death zone swarming with catastrophic monsters. No hero wished to throw their life away for any amount of gold. Urja had predicted this perfectly. Heroes who valued money would never set foot in a place as dangerous as Arene. That was precisely why he built his base here. Gordon found himself astonished. His master's precise calculations, his knowledge of Arene, and his bold rejection of Demon King traditions made it feel as though Bera had lived through all of this once before. Back in Hilderan, the king roared in shock and disbelief when he learned that not a single hero accepted the mission. He questioned how they could call themselves heroes while refusing to save a princess. His advisors tried to soothe him, explaining that heroes in the Arene region were unlike others. Driven by profit above morality, they were extremely selective with their missions. Inside his tower, Barrett calmly examined the system store, scrolling through the available purchases. The options were disappointing. The store offered low-tier soldiers, such as skeletal warriors, priced at 10,000 demonic energy points, as well as enhancements like weakened dimensional interference. He quickly understood that creating a dependable army would demand a staggering amount of points and a long stretch of time. He leaned back on his throne, deep in thought. His current demonic energy, while increasing rapidly thanks to the turmoil in Hilderan, was still far too insufficient to confront an entire battalion of heroes. The familiar dread of his previous life rose within him, a fear he knew intimately. It reminded him just how easily a demon king could be outnumbered and crushed if he relied solely on outdated traditions. Determined to avoid repeating his past downfall, Vera made a decisive move. He ordered Gordon to contact Draxon immediately, declaring his intention to exchange demonic energy for human currency. Gordon froze. His expression twisted into utter disbelief, followed by panic. He could not comprehend the idea. Demonic energy was the lifeblood of their species, the resource that elevated demon kings to greater heights, unlocked tower functions, expanded armies, and amplified their abilities. To trade something so sacred for mere human gold felt like a sacrilege beyond imagination. Berge, however, remained unmoved. He convinced himself that Draxon, with his greed and long-term territorial control, would be willing to pay an enormous amount. Without a significant influx of human funds, Baron knew he had no realistic strategy to repel heroes with his current reserves. He glanced out the tower window toward the distant fortress city of Halton, nestled not far from the mountains. There was one thing he could accomplish with human money, and he fully intended to do it. Soon after, Beria disguised himself as a wandering mercenary and arrived at the gates of Halton. The guards halted him immediately, baffled that any mercenary would dare approach the Urgist Mountains alone. Suspicion clouded their faces. Beria didn't bother arguing. He tossed a single gold coin toward them. The guards froze mid-sentence, their eyes gleaming greedily. A subtle wink from Beria hinted at sharing the coin among themselves, and the gate was opened in an instant. Inside the bustling streets, Beria took in the city's unfamiliar layout. He lacked detailed knowledge of the region and decided he would need a local guide. He set out to find one. The scene shifted to the headquarters of the Crimson Falcon Mercenary Guild. Members lounged around, drinking lazily, bragging about past expeditions. One mercenary suggested they pack up soon, but their leader dismissed the idea, calling the region a paradise where monsters did the fighting, and they collected the spoils afterward. Their conversation drifted toward rumors. Some spoke mockingly about claims of a new demon king appearing in the mountains, calling it nonsense. They argued that demon kings always built their towers in accessible places, not hostile, monster-infested wastelands. Others scoffed at the news that the Princess of Hilderan had been kidnapped, insisting that no demon king would cross the entire continent for such a reckless act. One mercenary noted that even the Hero Guild refused the rescue mission the moment they heard the destination. The group eventually concluded that the entire situation was a scam, probably fabricated to extract more money from frightened kingdoms. The leader agreed with a laugh, stating that people became irrational whenever money was involved. At that exact moment, Burry appeared silently behind them, suddenly understanding the source of their behavior. The mercenaries jolted up, startled by his sudden presence, their instincts demanding to know who he was. Buri replied with a thin, mocking smile. They seemed well-informed, he noted internally, making them the perfect guides he needed. He ordered them to leave only one guide behind and for the others to clear out. The mercenaries immediately drew their weapons. They called him an intruder and warned that he would not leave their hall alive. The fight erupted instantly. The mercenaries attacked in coordinated waves, but Bera countered their strike with inhuman precision. His movements were fluid, his blows devastating. One mercenary attempted a surprise attack from behind with a massive hammer, but Bera stopped it effortlessly with one hand. The attacker's weapon trembled in disbelief, as did the mercenary himself. Soon, Burrow was surrounded by crossbows aimed directly at him. He did not falter. With a swift motion, he grabbed the hammer wielder and hurled him into the group, scattering bodies across the floor. Cries of pain echoed as the mercenaries fell one by one. Outside the guild hall, those who escaped stared at each other in despair, asking why they were still fighting and why their strength never exhausted. Inside, the last few mercenaries collapsed under Beria's overwhelming power. Their leader trembled where he stood, calling Beria a monster as he watched his comrades fall like leaves in a storm. Beria approached him slowly, eyes glowing ominously in the dim light. He declared he would spare him if he cooperated. Terrified, the leader agreed at once. Barrett demanded the location of the city's slave market. The leader obeyed, guiding him to a grand estate with a reinforced iron gate. Inside, Barrett observed rows of human slaves, their chains rattling in the torchlight. The leader nervously asked if the selection did not satisfy him. Barrett dismissed the notion and tossed the man a heavy pouch of gold. The leader's attitude shifted instantly, greed devouring fear. He led Beria to an underground section of the market. As they walked deeper into the dim corridors, Beria wondered how the man could remain composed after watching his entire guild be slaughtered. The answer came to him with a bitter clarity. Humans and demons were no different. One raced after money, the other raced after energy. Both were slaves to their desires. They descended into the darker chambers where prisoners of various races were held. Here, the leader gestured toward a restricted area. This was where the rarest, most valuable slaves were kept. Barry remembered Gordon's earlier question. What did he plan to do with so much human money? Now he had the answer. Beria sought not humans, but captured non-human races. He desired someone loyal, cunning, and capable of infiltrating hero ranks. Specifically, he was looking for an elf known for his integrity, someone who could serve as his eyes and ears, a spy capable of sowing confusion among the heroes. In the Hildering Kingdom, the famed hero Hillen Cargill finally arrived at the royal palace. The king welcomed him with a mixture of desperation and hope, confident that this legendary warrior would accept the mission without hesitation. Hillen listened solemnly. With a calm but unwavering resolve, he pledged to rescue Princess Ernan and bring back the Demon King's severed head in the name of justice and honor. His declaration filled the court with renewed morale. Far to the north, Beria was still deep within the slave market's underground wing. The merchant accompanying him cleared his throat nervously and asked what type of slave Beria sought. Beria's attention settled on a chained elf sitting silently among the captives. He indicated that he wished to purchase that elf, and casually declared that the mercenary who guided him would cover the cost. The mercenary blurted out an objection, shaken by the demand, but the moment Beria fixed him with a cold, terrifying stare, his protest died instantly. Trembling, he agreed to pay, stumbling over his words. Beria then ordered everyone except the slave merchant to leave the chamber. The merchant hesitated, warning that elves tended to become feral and uncontrollable when provoked. Beria assured him that if any damage occurred, he would compensate for it. His tone left no room for argument. Beria approached the elf, taking note of the creature's chains and the humiliation carved into his posture. Humans had reduced a proud race to shackled merchandise. The elf sensed his demonic aura immediately and asked, startled and suspicious, why a demon would concern himself with an elf at all. Berger offered him a proposition: revenge against the humans who had enslaved him. The elf's gaze sharpened. The idea was enticing, but he confessed that he trusted demons just as little as he trusted humans. Barry insisted he was different and proposed a contract. 50 years of loyalty in exchange for freedom and shelter. For an elf, 50 years was little more than a brief chapter of life, and it was undeniably better than rotting in chains. Still, the elf refused. He reminded Beria that demons were enemies of the World Tree, the sacred source the elves existed to protect. Aligning with demons risked the very destruction of the world itself. How, he demanded, could he trust such a creature? Beria understood. Deep down, he knew the elf was right. Requesting the help of a guardian of the World Tree was contradictory by nature. So he made a bold move. He swore upon the Demon King's standards that he would honor his promise and never harm the World Tree. To demons, swearing upon the standards held a weight equal to an oath sworn upon the World Tree by elves. In return, Burge demanded that the elf, Granada of the Maple Tribe, swear loyalty for 50 years under the sacred name of the tree. Granada stared at him in disbelief at the strange demon before him. He agreed, but only on the condition that he meet the Demon King who supposedly sent Beria. Burge simply revealed the truth. He was the Demon King. Granada reacted with pure disbelief. He mocked the idea that a demon king would personally come to buy a slave, especially since their strength reportedly diminished the farther they were from their tower. He challenged Barry arrogantly, vowing to pledge loyalty not for 50 years, but 100 if Barry proved his claim. The next moment, Granada found himself instantly transported to the 5th floor of Barry's tower. The abrupt shift left him frozen. Barry reminded him of the 100-year promise. Granada looked around and quickly grew displeased. He complained about the emptiness of the tower. Bare rooms on the lower floors, no traps, no monsters. When he reached the 4th floor and saw that it contained only a natural environment instead of defensive creatures, his disbelief only grew stronger. How, he wondered aloud, could Barry hope to stop heroes with a tower this lacking in even basic defenses? Their arrival would tear this place apart in less than a year. Barry responded, not with words, but with raw demonic pressure, filling the air with suffocating weight. Granada nearly collapsed, overwhelmed by the realization that this was no ordinary demon. This was a true king. A chilling truth dawned on him. The Ergus Mountains were swarming with catastrophe-class beasts, yet none had attacked Beria on their journey. Their silence meant they feared this demon king. Granada finally bowed to reality and invoked the sacred name of the World Tree, swearing a century of service. Hidden beneath his oath, however, was a small hope. Perhaps Beria would assign him a sinister mission where he could enact vengeance upon humans. But Beria shocked him with his very first command. Prepare dinner. Granada froze, dumbfounded. Cutting vegetables in the kitchen, he kept asking himself how he had gone from holy guardian to household servant. Princess Ernan soon joined him and enthusiastically offered her help, adding to his confusion. He could not understand what kind of place this tower was. Later, they gathered in the dining room around a grand table full of dishes. Granada hesitantly asked about the girl's identity. Beria calmly explained that she was Ernan Hilderan, the first princess of the Southern Kingdom. Granada nearly fainted. A demon king kidnapping the crown princess of a powerful nation seemed suicidal. He repeated his warnings about the tower's weakness, insisting that it could not possibly hold against the heroes who would soon come. Beria dismissed his concerns and ordered him to sit and eat. He added that Granada's true purpose in the tower was to cook, and he was exceptionally good at it. Ernan smiled gently at the elf's bewilderment. Meanwhile, Granada sank deeper into confusion at the absurdity of the situation. In the end, Granada asked if Beria intended for him to battle the heroes. Beria replied that if the heroes ever reached the 4th floor, the battle would already be lost, because crossing the Ergus Mountains alone required strength far beyond ordinary heroes. Beria then explained Granada's real assignment. He wanted him to become a spy, sowing disorder within the human world. But before that, Beria insisted on testing the elf's combat abilities. Granada was astonished. He wondered how a mere elf could fight a demon king inside his own tower. Beria then set the terms. He would fight with one hand without using demonic energy. If Granada managed to defeat him, the contract period would be reduced by 50 years. Granada accepted Beria's challenge with fierce determination. His eyes gleamed with anticipation as he vowed internally to unleash every skill he possessed. The duel erupted the instant Beria signaled its beginning. The elf moved like a streak of green light, swift, precise, and fluid. Beria observed him with genuine interest, noting that years of slavery had barely dulled his reflexes. To Berger, Granada's footwork and movement patterns were unmistakably elven, elegant, balanced, and deeply in tune with mana. He wondered whether the elf had absorbed ambient mana from the naturalized 4th floor, or if his inherent physical gifts remained intact despite his captivity. Granada responded with a surge of magical force, launching bolts of elemental energy that crackled through the air like whips. He declared through his actions that he was no ordinary elf, that his capabilities far exceeded those of his kin. His expression hinted that Bear had made a mistake choosing him as an opponent. A mass of enchanted roots erupted from the ground, coiling tightly around Bear's ankle. Granada saw the opening as a golden opportunity to reclaim 50 years of freedom. He dashed forward, preparing a decisive blow to exploit what appeared to be a moment of vulnerability. But as he closed in, a chilling aura erupted from Beria's body, not demonic energy, but pure, terrifying physical force. The elf froze mid-strike, remembering with horror who stood before him. Beria reassured him outwardly that he would not break his promise. He would not use any demonic energy, nor would he unleash enough force to kill him, but he did intend to end the match. Granada tried to halt the duel, panic rising within him, but his plea came too late. With a single, controlled punch, Beria shattered the roots and sent Granada flying across the room, ending the contest instantly. The scene shifted to Holton Walk, home of the Crimson Falcon Mercenary Guild. This time, the mercenaries welcomed Beria with nervous enthusiasm, treating him like a visiting noble rather than an intruder. Their leader bowed deeply and offered their services for the entire year, grateful for the chance to avoid further violence. One grumbling member whispered complaints about their leader's sudden admiration for the man who had beaten them into the ground. Their leader pretended not to hear him. Berja tossed a heavy pouch of gold onto the table, the coins clinking loudly. The mercenaries erupted in cheers, swearing unwavering loyalty and proclaiming themselves champions of devotion, though their leaders silently debated replacing them with a more competent squad in the future. Barrett then instructed them to accept the elf Granada as part of their unit, explaining that Granada would relay command from this day forward. The mercenaries hesitated until Granada stepped forward, his face still bruised from the earlier duel. Their hesitation melted instantly. Seeing his battered appearance, they embraced him with sympathetic cries, feeling a strange kinship with someone who had endured the same pain they had. Barry observed their reactions quietly. Though the group seemed unimpressive on the surface, they were seasoned professionals accustomed to surviving the hostile lands around the Irgus Mountains. Such people were rare and not easily replaced. He also recalled an important fact. Only one hero had accepted Hildren's desperate commission, Hillen Cargill, the renowned warrior who had slain the Demon King of Lust, a formidable opponent without doubt. Addressing the mercenaries as their new commander, Vera revealed their first assignment: investigate Hillen Cargill, the hero employed by the Kingdom of Hildren. The mercenaries saluted with surprising discipline, declaring their absolute obedience. With the matter settled, Bear returned to his tower, his mind drifting to the next crucial step. He had entrusted Granada with gathering information on the hero. Now he needed to strengthen himself. Having sold nearly all his demonic energy for human money, a gamble few demon kings would ever consider, Beria's only path to increasing his might lay in alternative means. He recalled the existence of soulflowers, rare monocrystals born from untouched ancient nature. These luminous blossoms grew only where monostorms were strong and human influence weak. The Irgus Mountains, wild and untouched, were exactly such a place. Soulflowers might not match the power of demonic energy, but they were potent enough to enhance his physical and magical abilities. They were, in his eyes, a hidden treasure waiting to be harvested. Gordon expressed immediate concern. Searching for soulflowers in the mountains was like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the haystack was alive and trying to kill you. He reminded Beria that the region was teeming with dangerous monsters waiting for an opportunity to ambush them. Beria agreed that finding the flowers would be difficult. Unless they possessed a powerful mana detector, the search could take years. But he remained confident that facing monsters alone posed no significant threat. Before he could continue, a gentle knock interrupted their discussion. Princess Ernan Hilderin peeked through the door with a cheerful smile. A small blue slime perched adorably atop her head, wobbling like jelly. Her bright mood contrasted sharply with the grim atmosphere inside the room. She ran out happily into the hallway, playing with the wind spirits that followed her everywhere. For someone who had been kidnapped, she seemed to enjoy herself immensely. Ernan confessed she had been bored lately and reminded Beria of his earlier promise, to let her decorate the 4th floor however she pleased. Beria blinked in surprise. She had already done exactly that. The floor had transformed into a lush world of nature and beauty at her whim. He could not help but wonder how far her enthusiasm would go, or how strange it was that a princess was joyfully decorating a Demon King's tower as if it were her own garden. She turned to Beria with a shy smile, admitting that she didn't expect he would allow her to roam freely. She was just happy to come check on him. Before she could continue, Beria suddenly lifted her into his arms. Ernan let out a startled gasp as he stepped onto the balcony. He told her to hold on, and launched into the sky. Ernan's scream morphed into laughter as they rose above the clouds. Her eyes widened in awe as she looked down at the sprawling mountains and horizon. She admitted softly that she hadn't seen any of this the night she was kidnapped. It had been too dark and too terrifying. But now, floating above the world, she realized how breathtaking everything was. As the sun broke over the horizon, bathing the sky in gold and crimson, she whispered in wonder at how vast the world truly was. She felt a quiet ache stir inside her chest. Memories of her repetitive life in the palace resurfaced. Endless etiquette lessons, unending political lectures, and rigid magical training that left no room for dreams. Day after day, her life had flowed in identical patterns, leaving her certain she would remain bound to that monotony until death. Watching the vast world beneath her, she confessed to Beria that she might be the only person in her kingdom who had ever flown above the Irgus Mountains. Yet Beria paid little attention to her sentimental remark. His mind remained fixed on the task. He turned her focus back to the mission she had been assigned. Ernan, with a brief pout, asked that he at least call her by her name, arguing that if they would be together for a long time, formalities felt unnecessary. Beria agreed, though not without scolding her for forgetting her position. He threatened that he could always toss her into the underground prison if she failed to cooperate and refused to use her elemental spirits to locate the soul flowers. Startled, Ernan apologized and summoned her water and wind spirits. They dispersed through the mountain range to begin their search. Vera expected the hunt to take some time, but he trusted the spirit's senses over his own. Suddenly, Ernan cried out that she had sensed something. Vera immediately descended toward the indicated location. When he landed, he noticed several hulking monsters surrounding the rare flower. They had reached it first. He muttered that it seemed they had unexpected guests. A group of towering beast-like entities emerged, glaring at him with hostility. Bertie explained to Ernan that these were not ordinary creatures, but monsters of demonic origin, descendants of demons who had abandoned the demon realm centuries ago. Standing tall, he commanded them to obey the authority of a demon king, to leave the flower untouched and depart. The monsters erupted in laughter and snarls. They declared openly that they neither obeyed demons nor tolerated them. Their leader issued a challenge, promising Berja's death. Berja chuckled darkly, realizing Gordon had been right. Expecting reason from monsters had been foolish. He resolved to incinerate every one of them. The monsters launched themselves at Berja with savage cries, swinging massive claws and fangs filled with killing intent. Flames roared around him as he answered their hostility in kind. Screams of burning flesh echoed across the icy mountain air. One monster spotted Ernan and shouted to strike down the weakest first. The entire group charged toward her like a living avalanche. Before they could reach her, a blazing inferno erupted from Berja's hands, reducing them to ash in an instant. Ernan stood her ground, recalling that even bull tribe orcs, capable of felling ogres, were nothing compared to this force. Yet here, even these powerful creatures could not approach her. Berja unleashed a torrent of pure demonic force, shaking the ice beneath them. In the blink of an eye, the battlefield fell silent. Corpses of charred and frozen monsters littered the snowy ground. He alone remained standing. Amid the ruin, Ernan spotted a radiant crimson blossom hidden in the snow. Its aura a beautiful mixture of water and ice mana. It pulsed with purity, captivating her instantly. Berta, however, warned her not to grow greedy. He promised she would receive one if she managed to find additional flowers. Her eyes sparkled with renewed enthusiasm, but despite searching relentlessly with her spirits until exhaustion overtook her, no second flower could be found. They returned to Bera's tower. While resting, Beria pondered Ernan's position. As the first princess of Hilderin, she possessed far more potential value than he had ever imagined. He murmured that he had initially believed kidnapping her was a mistake, but now he saw the possibilities. At that moment, Gordon hurried into the hall carrying urgent news. He had received a rapid transmission from Granada, who reported that Hillen Cargill, alongside 32 additional heroes, had departed the capital. However, instead of marching directly toward the Ergist Mountains, they had chosen the traditional hero route, forming a party, completing quests in rural villages, and strengthening themselves steadily. Gordon presented several counterplans to intercept them, asking Bera to examine each option. To his shock, Bera tossed the documents aside without reading them. Beria announced a surprising decision. He would not send any monsters or traps to obstruct the hero's journey. Gordon's eyes widened with disbelief. But Beria explained that half measures only made heroes stronger. Weak obstacles were training opportunities, nothing more. He ordered Gordon to relay this declaration to Granada and instruct the mercenary squad to accompany the heroes, establishing trust rather than hostility. Gordon expressed his confusion, remarking that his master never followed conventional Demon King practices, and questioning how he intended to defend the tower with its current pathetic structure. Burry reassured him. He intended to reinforce the tower, but in an unconventional way. He announced he would require a dwarf. Gordon objected immediately. An elf, a human-like princess, and now a dwarf in a demon tower? It would make them a laughingstock among the demon realm. Berja scoffed at his concerns. He clarified that he didn't need the dwarf himself, only the tools dwarves crafted. He revealed his strategy with a wicked gleam. Since heroes assumed the tower's first floor would be weak, filled with low-level monsters, they would never expect dozens of heavy cannons waiting for them. Gordon's jaw dropped. The idea was outrageous, but undeniably effective. Just as he began to accept the madness, Gordon suddenly shrieked. The scene shifted to Wolfnir, the underground city of the dwarves. Sparks illuminated the cavernous halls as Logar Friedrich, famed as the greatest blacksmith of his generation, hammered glowing metal with masterful precision. Logar had no idea that at this very moment, he had become the next target of the rebel demon king, Bersha. After a long journey, Berej finally arrived at the great dwarven city of Wolfnir. Massive stone buildings, carved directly into the mountain walls, loomed over him. The moment he stepped inside, memories surfaced before regressing. He had fought countless dwarves, yet this was his first time actually visiting their homeland. Curious, he entered a nearby shop. Placing several gold coins on the counter, he asked the dwarf merchant where the most renowned blacksmith in Wolfnir could be found. The dwarf's expression brightened immediately at the sight of the gold. He remarked with amusement that, for a human, Berej certainly understood how to speak the language of business. Berej replied casually that he had merely heard dwarves loved money just as much as heroes did. The merchant laughed heartily at that and gave him directions. If Berej continued deeper into the city, he would come across a massive central shaft. From there, the dwarves operated a two-step security system. They checked identification and then transported guests to the correct underground floor. But instead of waiting for inspection or the lift, Barej simply jumped straight down into the depths, landing effortlessly on the correct floor. He remembered the merchant's instructions clearly. When you reach the lowest level, look for the deepest room. Barej opened the heavy iron door. Inside, a dwarf with powerful arms was forging metal with rhythmic precision. This was Logar Friedrich, the legendary blacksmith of Wolfner. Even at a glance, Barej could tell that Logar's craftsmanship was extraordinary. His movements flowed like a dance, each strike of the hammer infused with perfect technique. Barej thought quietly that if this man was truly the best blacksmith among the dwarves, then abducting him would be simple enough. His expression shifted, and he extended his hand toward Logar, ready to seize him instantly. But the moment Logar's hammer struck the metal again, an explosion of fire burst outward, engulfing the room and rushing toward Barej. Logar had sensed his demonic energy. In the next instant, Logar leaped above Barej's head, his massive hammer descending with full force. The weapon collided with Barej's bare hand, which stopped it effortlessly. With a cold gaze, Barej asked if the dwarf was a hero. Logar introduced himself as Logar Friedrich, a blacksmith who had inherited the power of heroes. Furious, he demanded to know how a demon had entered dwarven land and vowed that Barej would not leave Wolfner alive. Barej only smiled, remarking that someone so weak certainly talked a lot. Then, grabbing Logar by the neck, he corrected him he was not merely a demon. He was the Demon King. Logar's hammer slipped from his grip and crashed onto the floor. Just then, two dwarven guards burst into the workshop, apologizing for the intrusion and asking about the loud noise. But when they entered, the entire room was empty. Logar Friedrich had vanished. High above Wolfner, Barej now sat casually atop a rooftop, one hand gripping Logar's hands. Below them, the entire city echoed with alarm bells, and frantic shouting news was spreading that someone had abducted Logar Friedrich. Barej warned him calmly that if he made too much noise, he would kill him. Trembling, Logar asked whether Barej had come to abduct the dwarven princess. Barej dismissed the idea and instead asked about something else. He knew dwarven blacksmiths always constructed hidden underground escape tunnels in case of emergencies, and he wanted Logar to guide him to them. Logar's face paled. He became convinced that the Demon King must indeed be after the princess. Tears welled up in his eyes as he lamented his fate. He inwardly admitted that the reason he had lived such a quiet, peaceful life up until now was precisely because he was terrified of fighting demon kings. He had no idea how things had escalated to this point, or how he had become the unfortunate target today. Dangling from Berta's grip atop the stone rooftop, Logar Friedrich trembled as the Demon King made another quiet threat. Berta stated calmly that if Logar refused to cooperate, then perhaps he should simply kidnap the dwarven princess instead. The meaning was clear. Logar could talk, or someone far more important would be taken in his place. Logar panicked instantly, demanding to know what Berta was plotting. Internally, his thoughts spiraled. Part of him, desperate for survival, considered the unthinkable. Should I sell the princess to save my own life? But the moment the idea entered his mind, he imagined the consequences. If such a rumor spread, how would the dwarves ever look at him again? They already believed he was weak. If they learned he had even contemplated betraying the princess, he would be tortured for the rest of his life. Trying to muster courage, Logar shouted that Berta was a vile, evil creature, but inside he knew he was cornered. The Demon King then asked him again, coldly, would he give up the princess? Or would he walk on his own 2 feet and come with him? The dwarf nearly broke. He was absolutely willing to abandon the princess if it meant survival, but he dreaded lifelong humiliation and torment. Then, Berta leaned close, whispering softly into Logar's ear. If Logar cooperated, the Demon King would guarantee his safety, swearing upon the Demon King's standard. Logar froze. The Demon King's standard was the ultimate vow, sacred to all demon kings, unbreakable even to them. No demon lord would dare violate such an oath. If Berta spoke those words, he meant them. Closing his eyes tightly, Logar made his decision. When he opened them again, his expression had changed completely. He forced an awkward smile and agreed to guide Berta through the dwarves' secret underground passages. Inside the workshop Logar had been abducted from, several dwarven soldiers stood ready with raised axes. Behind them stood Princess Louise Verft, scowling with barely contained fury. She had come expecting her weapon to be finished, only to find her blacksmith gone. A soldier informed her cautiously that all evidence suggested Logar had been kidnapped. Princess Louise snapped at them, demanding to know how a hero could possibly be abducted. Another soldier muttered that although Logar was technically a hero, he was also a blacksmith, which meant his fighting ability wasn't the greatest. She silenced them immediately with a glare and ordered them to search for him at once. The soldiers saluted and hurried out after she threatened to tear off their heads if they returned empty-handed. Meanwhile, deep beneath Wolfner, Logar and Bera were moving through a cramped underground tunnel carved by dwarven hands many ages ago. Logar crawled ahead, guiding the Demon King through his hidden escape route. Berger, stuck directly behind him, grew visibly irritated. Staring at the dwarf's backside only worsened his mood. With barely contained disgust, he asked Logar how long he was supposed to endure being forced to look at such a repulsive sight. Logar apologized profusely, explaining the dwarven escape tunnels were extremely narrow by design, and assured him that they were almost at the exit. Bera and Logar Friedrich finally emerged outside the fortified dwarven city of Wolfner. As soon as they reached open air, Logar straightened himself. He nervously announced that his role was finished. From this point onward, the Demon King was on his own. Logar clearly hoped this farewell meant he could finally escape. But the moment Logar tried to turn away, Bera's expression shifted. A chilling aura ignited around him, dark, heavy, unmistakably demonic. Logar froze. Bera remarked that the dwarf was making far too much noise for someone in his position. Panic rushed through Logar. He reminded Bera that he had sworn on the Demon King's standard earlier. He had guaranteed Logar's safety if he cooperated. But Bera only smiled faintly and asked what garbage standard Logar was talking about. He claimed he didn't care about such things at all. Tears began forming in Logar's eyes as he shouted in disbelief, asking what kind of Demon King, ignored even the sacred standard. But Bera extended a hand, crackling with power, asking calmly what he should do with him. Logar dropped to his knees, trembling. His mind instantly returned to the same thought as before. I should have sold out Princess. Desperate, apologizing through sobs, Logar began insisting that he was extremely useful. He proclaimed that no other dwarf could match his metallurgy, that he could craft any weapon Bera desired. Bera questioned him again. As a hero, was he truly willing to work for the Demon King? Logar nodded frantically. He said he could be trusted. He could serve Bera in secret, even act as a spy within Wolfner. He insisted that there would be no suspicion, and that he could be used as a hidden blade whenever Bera wished. Only when Bera asked whether he was willing to swear allegiance did Logar fully commit. Without hesitation, he declared the Demon King to be great, praised him repeatedly, and pledged loyalty, all while inwardly cursing him. Logar had no intention of being a real subordinate. He was merely pretending. His plan was simple. The moment he escaped, he would assemble a dwarven pursuit squad and hunt Bera down. He believed Bera would regret sparing him for the rest of his life. But before Logar finished plotting his revenge, the world around him suddenly warped. In the blink of an eye, Logar found himself standing inside a grand park, the fourth floor of the Demon King's tower. He staggered in shock, unable to comprehend how he had been teleported instantly from the outskirts of Wolfner. Nearby, Bera's assistant Gordon panicked at the sight of the dwarf, whispering that even a dwarven blacksmith was a hero-class being. Bera reminded the assistant not to panic. At that moment, a communication crystal activated and Grandad's projection appeared, ready to give a report, until he also noticed the dwarf standing there and froze in disbelief. Bera casually waved him off, telling him to report later. Soon after, Princess Ernan approached Logar. She asked whether he was a hero who had come to rescue her, but one look at his terrified expression made her realize that wasn't the case at all. Then, Logar finally exploded in confusion. He demanded to know what Bera was doing. Hadn't the Demon King said he would let him go? Bera calmly corrected him. He had never said such a thing, and asked if he's no longer value his life. Logar argued that Bera had promised mercy. Bera acknowledged that he had indeed said so, after Logar swore allegiance. But before leaving Wolfner, Bera had simply knocked him unconscious and carried him here. It was the most sensible action. After all, who knew what a panicked dwarf might attempt on the journey? Only then did Logar realize what had happened. His face shifted into a forced smile, which immediately broke into trembling outrage as he shouted about the unfairness of it all. But his protest ended quickly when Bera asked whether he was happy to be his new subordinate. Logar's face contorted, eyes watering, nose running as he forced a cheerful reply, insisting he was absolutely delighted. Bera finally gave him his first command. Logar asked fearfully what the mission was. The Demon King replied. Logar was to install a large number of cannons on the first floor of the tower weapons designed explicitly to annihilate approaching heroes. The scene opened at the Hero's Journey Preparation Station, where an external Granada reported through a holographic communication link. He calmly informed his superior that rumors were rapidly spreading among the heroes. According to the latest intelligence, the newly emerged Demon King was believed to wield black flames, prompting the heroes to equip themselves with fire-resistant gear in preparation. The Granada added that another rumor had begun circulating as well. Many heroes believed the Demon King had refrained from deploying demonic beasts because he was afraid. From their perspective, his silence was interpreted as weakness. Barry listened without visible reaction. In a flat, dismissive tone, he remarked that the heroes had clearly not lost their killing intent yet. Whether they sought glory through battle or wealth through conquest, He declared that none of them would gain anything from this journey. In the end, they would lose everything, and eventually, even their desire to fight. Before ending the holographic call, Bear ordered the Granada to continue monitoring the heroes closely and report any changes without delay. Granada acknowledged the command and cut the transmission. Left alone, he reflected inwardly. He realized that by deliberately withholding demonic beasts, Bear was subtly eroding the heroes' morale and expectations. More than that, it was clear this Demon King possessed an unsettling understanding of human psychology. He wondered if there had ever been a Demon King like him before, and felt genuine relief that Beria was not his enemy. The scene then shifted to Bera's tower. Bera issued a cold command to Lager Friedrich, instructing him to install fire cannons on the tower's first floor. However, he added one critical restriction: mana stones were not to be used. Lager immediately panicked, arguing that constructing such weapons without mana stones was nearly impossible and that they would be ineffective against heroes. Beria cut him off sharply, stating that finding a solution was Lager's responsibility. He explained that heroes were favored by the dimension itself, granting them exceptionally sharp energy perception. Any trap powered by mana stones would be detected long before activation. That was precisely why they could not be used. Lager attempted to protest again, but Bera's expression darkened. A sphere of black magic formed calmly in his hand as he reminded Lager that he had been brought here precisely because he was considered the greatest blacksmith. If Lager failed to meet expectations, Bera had no shortage of others who could replace him. Terrified, Lager broke down and hastily claimed that there was another method. Bera responded with a chilling smile, telling him he should have mentioned it sooner. Lager explained that he had once invented a device capable of concealing mana traces completely. Developing it had taken 3 years, but the finished prototype still remained in his workshop back in Wolfner. Bera's face hardened. He demanded to know whether this claim was merely another desperate excuse. Crying and shaking, Lager swore that he was telling the truth. After a brief pause, Barrett chose to believe him, but not without insurance. He fastened a purple, rune-etched collar around Lager's neck. When Lager asked what it was, Barry explained casually that it was a magical restraint capable of separating his head from his body instantly, activated with a single gesture. With a thin, ominous smile, Barry added that the collar also distorted perception, preventing others from clearly seeing Lager's face. If Lager ever attempted to remove it, Barrow would interpret death as his chosen escape. Understanding the situation completely, Lager collapsed in fear and vowed that he would never remove the collar, no matter what. After issuing his orders, Barrett departed alongside Lager, traveling across several kingdoms to procure rare supplies and mana-compatible materials. The journey lasted nearly a full month. During that time, Barrett stored everything they gathered within his spatial pocket, carefully preserving the materials needed for his preparations. Once their task was complete, they returned to Wolfner, the dwarf kingdom. Inside the city, chaos had taken root. A massive boulder suddenly crashed down near a group of dwarves. At the center of the commotion stood Princess Louise Werft, her fury unmistakable. She shouted that it had already been a month and a half. Yet the dwarves still had not found Lager. She berated them for their incompetence and demanded to know how much longer she was expected to remain patient. One of the elderly dwarves stepped forward nervously and explained that Lager had dug countless underground tunnels over the years. Their forces were currently investigating every single passage, but it was highly likely that Lager had already escaped the city. Louise snapped back immediately, stating that of course he would have fled. It would be idiotic for him to remain behind. She declared with certainty that Lager had been kidnapped. In a sudden outburst, she grabbed the old dwarf by the face and lifted him off the ground. She coldly announced that she would grant them 2 weeks. If the kidnapper was not found by then, every one of them would die. Terrified, the old dwarf swore they would succeed. Louise released him and barked orders at the soldiers, commanding them to collapse every tunnel Lager had ever created. The dwarves scrambled to obey. As the soldiers rushed off, the focus shifted back to Princess Louise. It was clear that her physique was anything but ordinary. Her body radiated overwhelming physical power, far beyond what a normal dwarf should possess. In front of her rested an unfinished sword, still unshaped. She stared at it bitterly, thinking that this weapon should have already been hers if Lager had not disappeared. Clenching the blade tightly, she muttered that Lager was not allowed to die, not before completing her weapon. At that moment, a hidden section of the wall shifted. One of Lager's secret tunnels opened quietly behind her. Louise sensed movement and spun around, narrowing her eyes. Due to the face recognition interference mask, she could not recognize the figure who emerged. Still, she immediately identified the tunnel and stated that only Lager knew about such hidden passages. She demanded to know whether the man standing before her was him. Lager froze. Panicked, he barely managed to utter her title in a trembling voice. Louise cracked her knuckles and barked angrily that the bastard had dared to return alive. A furious smile spread across her face as golden vines of aura flared around her. She accused him of going into hiding because he did not want to forge her weapon. Through tears, Lager denied the accusation, insisting she had misunderstood everything. That only enraged her further. She reminded him sharply that she was a princess and accused him of insulting her by claiming she was mistaken. She declared that from that moment on, he would be her slave, bound to forge weapons for her for the rest of his life. Golden aura surged around her fist as she prepared to strike, stating that before anything else, she would punish him for running away. Before her punch could land, a violent blast erupted between them. Princess Louise was sent flying backward through the air. She slammed into the ground but quickly steadied herself, planting one hand down and regaining her balance with ease. When the dust settled, Berta stepped forward calmly. He told Lager to retrieve the equipment immediately. Louise glared at the newcomer, unable to discern his identity due to the interference effect. She demanded to know who he was and why he was helping a dwarf. He responded in a flat, emotionless tone, introducing himself simply as the master of the blacksmith she had just been extorting. Princess Louise leapt into the air, rage blazing across her face. She shouted that the blacksmith was her slave and would forge her weapon for the rest of his life. The two clashed midair, exchanging punches at terrifying speed, shockwaves tearing through the space around them. In the midst of the relentless barrage, Barris suddenly spotted an opening, and he swung his leg toward her neck. To his surprise, Louise caught the strike midair with one hand. The sheer strength behind her grip made his eyes narrow. Before Barra could recover, Louise countered with a brutal punch. The impact sent him flying upward, crashing into the ceiling above. She turned her head slightly and informed Lager that it was now his turn. That was when Barra reappeared. He seized Louise by the head and slammed into her, the two of them exchanging blows at terrifying speed. Shockwaves rippled through the chamber as debris was hurled into the air. Their clash resembled a battle between seasoned monsters rather than mortals. Barra recognized her immediately. She was the second daughter of Princess Verft. Though not officially a hero, her strength was exceptional. Even before his regression, Louise had been among the strongest individuals he knew, far stronger than she currently was. He calculated quickly. If she were allowed to grow further, she would become a serious threat. Killing her now would be the logical choice, but doing so would require unleashing his full demonic power. In his current weakened state, that was a dangerous gamble. If her soldiers witnessed his true strength, his identity as the Demon King would be exposed. As their fists continued to collide in blinding exchanges of golden and violet energy, Lager worked desperately in the background, dismantling a massive structure. During a brief opening, Barra shouted toward him, demanding to know whether everything was ready. Lager replied in panic that he was still dismantling the device, a massive mana phantom machine designed to erase and conceal mana traces. The mechanism was far larger than expected. Barry snarled that if Lager valued his life, he had 1 minute to finish. Lager swore he was moving as fast as possible. From the opposite side, Louise's aura flared violently. 12 blazing streams of golden power erupted from her body as she demanded to know who had given them permission to act. Berja glanced toward Lager and stated flatly that if things turned worse, he would abandon him without hesitation. Lager, pale with terror, promised he was nearly done. Berja clenched his jaw. He had no idea how long he could continue fighting without tapping into his full demonic reserves. Every second pushed him closer to exposure. As both their mana collapsed with terrifying speed, Louise shouted that she did not care where Bear had come from. He would not leave this place alive. She then threatened Lager directly, declaring she would break his legs so he could never escape again. Bear laughed darkly and remarked that she sounded more like a demon king than he did. He told her to give up, stating that he was taking both her blacksmith and all the equipment with him. At that moment, Lager shouted that the dismantling was complete. The instant the machine was disabled, the flow of mana shifted violently. Louise snarled that she would not hold back any longer if Lager believed he could simply return and steal what belonged to her. Barry saw his opening. He drove his foot straight into Louise's chest. The blow sent her crashing downward, smashing into the ground as a violent explosion tore through the chamber. Without hesitation, Beria opened his subspace pocket and ordered Lager to move immediately. Louise rose from the dust, declaring that such attacks were meaningless against her. But her words faltered when she realized that Beria, Lager, and the machine were all gone. Moments later, her soldiers arrived, asking what had happened. Louise scoffed at them, calling them slow and asking if they intended to arrive only after she was dead. She ordered them to pursue Lager through the tunnels at once. Then she stopped. The tunnels had been collapsed. Grinding her teeth, Louise realized the truth. Lager truly did not intend to return and forge her weapon. A cold smile spread across her face as wind swept through the ruined chamber. She declared the situation far more interesting than she had expected. With burning eyes and a twisted grin, she swore that she would personally hunt him down, even if she had to scour the entire continent. And when she found him, she would make Lager regret everything he had done today. After finally escaping the Wolfmire, Bera and Logger transported the Mana Phantom machine to Bera's tower. The moment the massive device was brought inside, Gordon frowned deeply. He had been in the middle of cleaning and immediately complained, asking what on earth that enormous object was. Princess Ernon, standing nearby, was equally stunned by its sheer size. Buri answered calmly that it was a magical tool essential for stopping the heroes. Logger soon announced that the installation of the Mana Phantom machine was complete. Bera was visibly surprised. It had been finished far faster than expected. He ordered Logger to activate it, warning him sternly that after all the trouble it took to acquire and transport the machine, it had better be worth the effort. Panicking slightly, Logger assured him that it would work and immediately activated the device. At once, the Mana Phantom machine began drawing mana from the surrounding area. Blue energy surged upward, filling the tower with an overwhelming presence. Gordon and Princess Ernon stared in shock as the air itself trembled. Suddenly, Bera's system activated. It announced that the tower had recognized the Mana Phantom machine and that synchronization required 10,000 points. Bera was startled to learn that the tower possessed a synchronization system, but without hesitation, he chose to pay the cost himself. The system immediately announced that 11,182 points had been consumed, and that the Mana Phantom machine had now recognized Demon King Bera as its master. At that moment, the machine's power source was completely converted, from mana to demonic energy. Before Bera could even comment, Logger burst out in excitement. He shouted that he had never imagined merging the machine with the tower was possible, let alone changing its power source. He declared it the discovery of the century. Bera was stunned. Even the creator of the machine had not known this outcome was possible. Soon after, Bera stepped outside the tower and told Princess Ernon to use her magic. Delighted, she asked if she could cast any spell she wanted. Bera gave his permission without restriction. Princess Ernon immediately summoned all 4 elements: fire, water, wind, and earth. The elements swirled violently above them. Gordon panicked, yelling that he had just finished cleaning the place. However, as Bersha stood outside, he noticed something strange. Normally, a spell of that magnitude would be detectable even from afar. Yet now he could neither see nor sense anything happening inside the tower. There was no mana fluctuation, no presence at all. Bera muttered inwardly that this must be the power of the tower synchronized with the Mana Phantom machine. Testing it further, he poured demonic energy into the tower itself. In an instant, the tower vanished. Shocked, Barry activated his demonic energy again, and the tower reappeared. He realized then that he could now hide the entire tower at will, in exchange for demonic energy, though the cost made it impractical for constant use. He smiled to himself. This power would be extremely useful in the future. Inside the tower, Logger shouted joyfully, barely containing his excitement. He asked Bera for permission to examine both the tower and the Mana Phantom machine. Hugging the massive device like a priceless treasure, he declared that he had never heard of, nor witnessed, anything like this in all of history, past or present. Calling it a historic discovery, he eagerly begged Beria to allow him to study it in detail. Beria muttered inwardly that Logger sounded like a demon itching for battle. Still, he granted permission, on one condition. If Logger's traps failed to wipe out the heroes on the first floor, the permission would be revoked. Logger immediately swore that he would sweep away those crafty heroes without fail, and plunged into his work with renewed fervor. While Logger busied himself, Bera moved to a quieter corner of the tower with Princess Ernon. After a brief pause, Beria told her that he had a proposal. When she asked what it was, Berja explained that he wanted her to confront the heroes who managed to reach the 4th floor. Princess Ernon blinked, then tilted her head cutely, asking if he truly wanted her to fight the heroes. She reminded him that she was a princess. Bera smiled faintly and replied that she was also a genius spiritist, one who had no intention of returning to her royal home. Inwardly, Beri wondered if assigning her such a role was unreasonable. She was still an innocent princess, someone who did not fully understand how cruel this world could be. But Princess Ernon was already lost in thought, considering how she should fight, summoning all her 4 elements in air. Seeing her enthusiasm, Berja reconsidered. He told her that she would not need to fight seriously. All she had to do was filter the heroes, reveal herself as an enemy, and delay them. If things went well, he would grant her whatever she desired. Princess Ernon's eyes lit up. She agreed, but added one condition of her own. She asked Bera to introduce her as a subordinate of the Demon King, not as a human princess. Bersha was momentarily stunned by the request, but after a brief pause, he agreed. It was a small demand. Hearing his answer, Ernon smiled brightly and even winked, teasingly asking whether she should seduce the heroes using her looks. Beri immediately shut that idea down, telling her to do only what he had instructed, nothing more. Later, Bera reviewed the information displayed across multiple system windows. With With the preparations complete, he assessed their chances calmly. The mass mana cannons on the first floor would reduce the number of heroes significantly. On the fourth floor, Princess Ernan would serve as bait to finish off the survivors. Still, Barry knew it was not enough. As things stood, even he could not cut down half of the heroes, whose numbers exceeded 200. With a quiet sigh, Bira summoned the Spirit Blossom Flower, now entirely tainted by demonic energy. He stared at it thoughtfully. Spirit blossoms corrupted by demonic energy were especially effective against demons, and heroes alike. If this war was to be won, he would have to become stronger himself, and that meant gathering more of them. Berge informed Princess Ernan that they would head outside to search the area. Princess Ernan reacted with visible excitement, happily hopping along as they moved. After thoroughly searching the surroundings, Princess Ernan finally reported that she could not find a single spirit blossom anywhere nearby. With an irritated expression, Bera inwardly thought that she was a rather useless spirit. This was already their third attempt. Bera concluded that perhaps they had simply been lucky the last time. Princess Ernan, however, felt uneasy. It was strange, far too strange, that they could not find even one spirit blossom in a region where they should naturally grow. At that moment, a figure appeared before them. An orc stepped out into their path. Seeing the familiar pale-skinned orc once more, Berge's demonic energy surged instinctively. He muttered that he was already sick of dealing with them. But instead of attacking, the orc suddenly dropped to one knee, planting a fist against the frozen ground. In a deep demonic voice, he introduced himself as Krutu, chieftain of the Blue Frost tribe. Krutu bowed his head and formally greeted the Demon King. He declared that his tribe wished to be accepted as Berge's kin. Behind him, his tribesmen followed suit, kneeling one after another and repeating his words, pledging themselves as kin to the Demon King. Berge was caught off guard. He asked bluntly why they desired to become his kin. Still kneeling, Krutu explained that his tribe's ancestors were once demons who betrayed the demon realm. Because of that betrayal, they bore the burden of original sin. To atone, he begged Beria to grant them the honor of serving him. Beria cut him off, telling him to stop with the flattering words. In the end, Beria pointed out, they simply wished to grow stronger by becoming kin of the Demon King. After all, orcs were far better suited to demonic energy than spirit blossoms ever could be. Krutu did not deny it. Instead, he signaled quietly to one of his men. The orc stepped forward carrying a box. When it was opened, 3 spirit blossom flowers were revealed inside. Berge was genuinely shocked. So this was the reason none could be found in the wild. He realized that Krutu had come fully prepared, not only with a fluent speech, but with a calculated offering. For a pale orc, this level of intelligence was unusual. Krutu explained, in order to survive in the harsh snowfields, the Blue Frost tribe had come to value wisdom over brute strength. Buri observed that they had come seeking him not merely for power, but because they understood the meaning of strength. Lowering his head further, Krutu silently accepted that judgment. Berge smiled faintly. He decided. Summoning his demonic energy, Berge declared that he would accept only Krutu as his kin. A red mist gathered around Krutu, enveloping his body. A demonic mark burned itself onto his chest as the contract was completed. Berge ordered Krutu to roam the snowfields, expand his tribe, and act in accordance with his will. If they remained loyal, Berge promised to reward them with something far greater than mere strength. When the transformation ended, Krutu had evolved completely, becoming one of the Demon King's kin. He knelt once more, pressing his forehead to the ground, and vowed absolute loyalty to Berge. Behind him, his tribesmen echoed their chieftain's oath in unison. After some time, Bera was shown seated upon his throne, silently observing the system interface before him. The display laid out everything clearly. Ergist Mountain had been fully fortified. His tower was operating at maximum efficiency. Outside, the Orc legions stood ready, forming the first defensive line. On the first floor of the tower, Lager had completed the installation of 60 mana cannons, all primed for activation. On the 4th floor, Princess Ernan waited as the final trap. Every piece was now in place. Berge's expression darkened as he leaned back slightly. Inwardly, he welcomed their arrival. The heroes who had humiliated him in his previous life would finally pay for it. The scene then shifted. At the foot of Ergist Mountain, Hero Hillen spoke as he stood beside Granada, that they had finally arrived. Before them stretched the gathered hero army, ranks upon ranks assembled in full force.